Listen up, get ready, I'm not gonna take no more. There's a revolution, a revelation going on in my soul. Buckle up, get ready, we're not gonna sit back.
Ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters, all you citizens of the world, welcome to another edition of the Live from the Heartland show. I'm Michael James, I'm your host, and once again, I'm up here in Chicago's very blue, wonderful 49th Ward. We are living in some fragile times. In the news here in Chicago and probably around the rest of the country, we hear a lot of the reports of the current president talking about not only keeping troops in Washington, D.C., but sending federal troops, the National Guard, et cetera, whatever he can muster up to Chicago and other cities run by blue mayors who mostly happen to be African American. I think the thing I would like to just impart with everybody, it's really important to pay attention. I don't know where you get your news, what you're hearing, but it's getting rough out there. ICE has a lot of money. The president is emboldened. On the other hand, he is getting smacked down over and over, too. And that's something to behold. Case in point, you remember a couple of weeks back, there was a lot of reporting on a young fellow. Turns out his name was Dunn. He's a 37-year-old former paralegal at the Justice Department. He was in the face of some federal agents in D.C. saying, we don't want you here, et cetera, et cetera. And he threw his Subway sandwich at a federal officer. With a lot of pomp and circumstance and promotion on the TV, he was arrested on a felony charge. And I'm happy to say that the New York Times reported this week that prosecutors were unable to obtain an indictment from a grand jury comprised of Washington, D.C. residents. You know, it makes me want to go get a Subway sandwich. The other thing that I want to make note of as we start off today's program is how proud I am of Chicago and Illinois' elected officials. Case in point, Brandon Johnson was on fire the other day, talking about Justice Brandeis, the first Jewish member of the Supreme Court, who said we can either have democracy or wealth in the hands of a few, but we can't have both. Brandon, a lot of progressives have been critical of him after having worked hard to get him elected. A lot of talk about what comes next in the next election, who's going to run, will he support him? I think that he's getting better. I think he's growing into his job. I think he's learning. And I think that under this challenge of the Trump forces in D.C., he will emerge as a strong mayor. So that's my prediction, and that is actually my hope. Not only was Brandon Johnson on fire, so was the governor. Pritzker was great, and he compared Illinois to a lot of red states and pointed out how much better we are in so many ways. One of the things that keeps coming up is Trump talking about sending troops in, but he's taken away resources to fight crime. He's defunded the police. Dig that. Trump has defunded the police department. Not only was the governor good and the mayor good, so was Tammy Duckworth, one of our senators. And, I think we have to pay close attention to what's going on. We have to be supportive and hopeful about the actions of our courts, our elected officials, and most importantly, we the people are a force that needs to be reckoned with. We can get stronger and stronger, better and better, take this mother on. Okay, that's enough. We're going to have a short musical break, and we're going to come back with a no stranger to the show, the one and only Rus Bradburd, former basketball player, former basketball coach, former English teacher, and still a current writer of many good books, and one in the works. Be right back with Rus Bradburd. Stay tuned here on the left end of your dial. Thank you.
Here, tell him he's the most violent person you know except respect.
Fucking catch a mockery. Boriak Pentila, Boriak Snake, she goes a cocktail bread for unleashing the beast. H.O.O.D a mock for an eye at least. Tread Jella, he's beating some fella, or you see a shot. red side lad, a one-way ticket, please, I've lost my bus pass. It's Jackson up, he's looking so tense, man. A Kylie fucking freaking-ish, man. Keep her let the fucker fucking fuck off, Jesus said on the cross. 2 tins of bush, 20 figs, and the dog is still lost. Who's next? Me, miss, and would you like a bag? While you're shopping out your nose, I see your ankle tag. Fuck you, curfew, dislocated, I suck it.
Welcome back, all you citizens of the world. It's live from the Heartland for the week of August 29th. And I still am Michael James up here in Chicago's Blue 49th Ward. And my next guest is no stranger to the show. It's one of my favorite pals, the one and only Rus Bradburd. Rus is back from Ireland, where he was working on his latest and newest book on a Fulbright grant. He's taken his daughter Alma off to college. And as usual, while he's here in Chicago, he's playing the fiddle, meeting up and caring for his friends before heading back to New Mexico. So good morning to you, Rus, and thanks for joining us.
It's good to be back, Mike. Thanks. And it's a beautiful day in Chicago.
It's a beautiful city, and it's a place we don't want any federal troops coming in or National Guard. And that said, let's talk about your trip to Ireland this summer. What have you been doing over there?
Well, I was in Belfast a couple of years ago on a Fulbright fellowship to work on a book. So I've been going back each summer to try and finish it. And the premise of the book, Mike, you'll find it interesting, is there's been it's Northern Ireland, Belfast, of course. So it's technically part of the UK. But there's a phenomenon there where the refugees are coming in from Syria, Sudan, and Ukraine, and then later Ukraine, once the war started there. And the parents are sticking their kids into Gaelic sports, traditional Gaelic sports, which are Gaelic football and a sport called hurling, which is like a stick and ball game. And they're ancient Irish sports. And so it's a funny thing to see, there's young women out there in hijabs. And, you look at the team roster and there's, Liam Kelly and Sean O'Flaherty and then Muhammad Akbar. Well, that's unusual. And so it's a very profoundly Irish sport. It's played a little bit in Chicago at Gaelic Park and a little bit in New York and Boston and a little bit in Australia, but it's mostly an Irish sport. The most popular sports in Ireland are Gaelic football and hurling. And just as maybe your great-grandfather did, if your great-grandfather had come over from Scotland or wherever he came, he might have stuck your father into Little League Baseball, even though he didn't play Little League Baseball growing up in France or Hungary or Scotland. And so it's a way for the kids to assimilate. And so it sort of hits on a lot of the nerves that, that I think would strike a chord with you, the idea that sports is a bridge between cultures, and it can really build community regardless of race or creed or gender. And so that's what's happening in Belfast. And it's not at the top levels. At Gaelic sports, the championship game with the senior men and women, they get 80,000 people, and it's live on television. And so it's a very big deal, but everybody plays as an amateur in Ireland. Even the coaches, they might get their gas money and their meals, but no one's on a salary that's playing Gaelic sports. And it's happening at the children's level. It's the youngest kids are coming in and being stuck into these Gaelic sports by willing parents wanting to keep the kids busy. So it's an interesting phenomenon.
One of the things that just popped up for me was hearing that there was some kind of, I would call, negative reaction to refugees and immigrants into Ireland. Did you see any of that, hear about that? What do you know about that?
Yeah, there is a little bit. Well, one of the things, just to back up a little bit, I think most of your listeners would know that at one time, Northern Ireland was involved in what they called the Troubles. The Catholics and the Protestants, or really the nationalists who wanted to be part of Ireland, and the Unionists and loyalists who wanted to remain loyal to the United Kingdom. There was sort of a tit-for-tat, low-grade civil war that killed nearly 4,000 people for over a 30-year period. The Good Friday Agreement that George Mitchell and Bill Clinton helped negotiate ended the fighting. 99% of the violence is gone now. It's really the model for the free world. But what I have found in the book is that the people that are running these Gaelic football clubs, or really anyone of our era, anyone who's over 40, was touched by the Troubles. They had an uncle killed, they had a friend killed, their neighbor got burned out of their house, that kind of thing. And so what I have found is the people that had been particularly on the nationalist Catholic side, they are very sympathetic to the immigrants. They've welcomed the immigrants in, and oftentimes I feel like part of the theory of the book that I didn't know when I started is this idea that the people who've been through war and been through violence are more likely to reach down and help a poor refugee. And so there's been a real warmth and welcoming on the Catholic side, which is the Gaelic football side of the community. The pushback has mostly come in Northern Ireland, has mostly come from the loyalist side. Now, down in the Republic of Ireland, it's more complicated because Conor McGregor, that great sportsman who's lost a civil trial for rape and is just sort of an obnoxious guy, he is leading he's one of the people leading a real anti-immigrant push. They're saying, Ireland for the Irish and that kind of thing. But to the people in Northern Ireland, they seem to, the Catholics particularly and the nationalists, they seem to get the idea that for years the Irish went all over the world and were pretty much welcomed. Yes, they had a hard time in America in the 1860s and 1880s and that, but the Irish have gone all over the world. The Brits have gone all over the world. At one point, something like a third of the world was controlled by the United Kingdom. And it just seems, I think it seems odd to me that they would be, holding up the stop sign for especially for war refugees. But there is starting to be a little bit of pushback, particularly in Dublin. And there were a few incidents in Northern Ireland. Like last summer, a Syrian grocery store got burned to the ground.
What's the name of your book? Do you have it picked out yet?
Well, the tentative title, the slogan for the Gaelic sports is the Gaelic Athletic Association is known as the GAA. And their slogan, which you see on bus stops and billboards all over Ireland and Northern Ireland, it's where we all belong. And it's a very welcoming kind of idea that, if you want to come play, it doesn't matter if you're any good or not, you can come play Gaelic sports if you find a local club. Something like 20% of the people in Ireland are involved in Gaelic sports, either as administrators or players, or they have children involved and that kind of thing. So it's a huge deal in Ireland and Northern Ireland. So the name of the book, it's a play on where we all belong. It's called Almost Like Belonging. And so there's an incident in the book that I write about where one of the Syrian players gets called, I can't say it on the air, but he gets called a name. And I asked about it afterwards. Like, it seemed like a racial slur to me. They said, "Oh, no, that's something we call everybody, and that's something everyone gets called in Ireland." And I thought, geez, well, it's almost like he belongs. If he's getting hollered at, for rough play the way any Irish kid would get hollered at, it's almost like he belongs. So I like the title, Almost Like Belonging, and I'm trying to complete it now and get it off to. I've finally retained a good agent, and I'm going to try and get it off to her in the next few weeks.
Well, this is not your first book about Ireland. I was over there chasing around after you along with my wife, Paige, I think 2005, when you were coaching the Tralee Tigers in the Irish Professional Basketball League. And you were working on a book then called Paddy on the Hardwood.
Your photos graced that book. I'm sure your listeners would know. So it's the second book of mine or first book of mine of a couple that have featured your photos. But yeah, and so that one was more my own personal journey and how I sort of made peace with my life in basketball and came to learn the Irish fiddle. This one this is a heavier book. It's not as personal to me, but it does seem like the immigration is a hot button issue all over the world now, and I don't think it's going to change, Michael, between climate change and war and famine and that kind of thing. And the other interesting thing about Northern Ireland is it was the least diverse place in the United Kingdom. And so only 4% of it's only 4% of the UK population, but now they're sending 20% of the immigrants, of the refugees, to Northern Ireland. And so that seemed like, I could just see people in London, they've always sort of pushed Northern Ireland to the side, the British government. And I could see them in London thinking, let's just send them to Northern Ireland. But for the most part, they've been welcomed. I'll tell you that the best part of it for me, and I think you'd agree with this, is the restaurants have improved dramatically in Northern Ireland now, because now there's Arabic food and there's different strains of Arabic food. There's African restaurants, and the food used to be pretty bland food all over Ireland, and each year it seems like it's getting more and more. There's getting to be more and more ethnic cuisine.
Well, I just one thing that I'm reminded of in talking to you, Russ, is when I was there in 2005, I was sort of impressed with how diverse it seemed to be. I saw a lot of African people and people who were certainly not white Catholic Irish types.
Well, it's grown dramatically, Michael, because I know that I first went to Belfast for, when my wife got a Fulbright in poetry, and we went there in 2012, and then we went back. We lived there in 2015. We took our sabbatical year and spent it there. That's when I first got the idea for the book. But I've noticed it now. Like, you'll just see downtown looks like it could be New York or Geneva, Switzerland, or
Chicago.
or Chicago, yeah, right, or Chicago. But for me, I can't speak for everyone in Ireland, but for me, like growing up in Chicago, it was, Chicago is a city of immigrants, and it's been a great thing for Chicago. But the bridges between cultures have always been. We've talked about sports a little bit and food a little bit, but music can also be a bridge. And in this case, what I'm hoping for, fingers crossed, is that books can be a bridge. You can learn about what life in the Army is like by reading Catch-22, and you can learn about what life was like in the Great Depression from reading Grapes of Wrath. And there's a zillion examples of how books can sort of help bridge cultures. And so my hope is that between music and food and sport, those are the three big ones. But really, books can do the same thing.
Well, you have a strong sense of discipline. And, as a basketball player, as a basketball coach, as a professor of English, and as a writer, talk a little bit, Russ, about your writing. When do you write? What inspires you? What hinders you? What helps you? I'm doing some writing, and I want to thank you for that nice introduction you did to my new book, En la Frontera, which is mostly photographs from El Paso and Juarez. But you're a good writer. You're a disciplined guy. I'm looking for your tips, and I'm sure some other listeners are too.
Oh, well, but before I forget, Mike, I love that book, the book of photos and essays, and let's remind listeners before the end of the show when your exhibit is, because I'll be at that. Looks like
that's good. That's going to be on Friday, the 12th of September.
Yeah, but it's South
from
Halsted.
6 to 9. South Halsted, 2101 South Halsted. It's a Yuri Eichen gallery.
Yeah, because I was
South Halsted.
I was
Friday the 12th.
That's it. Because I was trying to picture. Geez, I thought that's right by Armitage and Halsted, and I thought, wait a minute, that's South Halsted. It's So is it Pilsen then, or what is the name?
Yeah, it's in Pilsen.
Okay, yeah. So I will about the writing stuff. I wouldn't have much advice. I mean, I can tell you quickly, my two strengths are that I have pretty good energy levels and pretty good discipline. But the other one is I do think I know a good story when I see one, and I don't think I'm a great writer. No one's saying, wow, what beautiful prose when they look at my writing. But I do think that I've stumbled on good stories, whether it's Nolan Richardson's life or the gun violence story with Sean Harrington in Chicago. And now in this case, the timing of it, my last book about the commercialization of college sports, the satire called Big Time, is at a time when sports has never been more commercialized. So I think the timing of this one might be good. It seems like a good time to be writing about immigration. And so I do think, for people, keep an eye out for a good story. And I do think that's, and the other thing is it's not my friend Alex Shakar told me this, the great Chicago writer. He said he feels like there's one sort of a parrot on your shoulder that's on my shoulder. It's probably a pigeon, but he says there's one parrot on your shoulder that's the creative muse, and the other one is sort of the nuts and bolts and the grammar and the discipline and people think that I'm just so inspired because I'm an artist. But the truth is, a lot of what I do as a writer is just revise, and it's a slog. It can be, and it's an endurance test. And the problem, of course, is that you can work on it forever and it might not get published. And so there's a real, especially in fiction, where fiction is, you've got to finish the book before anyone will look at it. And so it's, I don't want to say it's a thankless job. I like writing, but the danger is you could work on a book and never get it published. And I don't know if I call it a danger, but you can feel like you've wasted your time if the book doesn't get published.
Well, you've had a bunch of yours published, and I'm sure you'll get the next one published. Let's go back to basketball for a minute. We're coming on the basketball season again. And in college sports, which was your focus, you coached both at UTEP in El Paso and up in Las Cruces at New Mexico State. We have this transfer portal now, and a lot of talk about how teams are buying up players, both in football and basketball. Any thoughts on that for the sports?
Yeah, I've got plenty. And in my last novel, The Satire Big Time, addresses that in a satirical way. I've gotten, Michael, where I think, I look at the New York Times every day. I listen to a little bit of NPR, this and that. But I've gotten where I think Stephen Colbert is a better news source than the New York Times editorial page. There's something that satire can get at, but with college sports, the transfer portal I think is a bad idea because kids can switch teams at will. But it was the grown-ups that taught the kids to do that. The coaches switch teams at will, and so why can't the kids do? So I think much of the lessons were, I think I've heard our fans at New Mexico State complain about all the kids care about now is money. Well, they didn't invent that idea. It was the coaches doing that well before. And the boosters doing that well before. So I have mixed feelings about it. There's teams in America for basketball next year that will have a budget. They've got 12 or 13 players. I can't remember which, but they'll have a budget of $10 million for a team for a year of 21-year-olds. In a way, I think that's great. It'll put money in the African-American community, and it's about time. And no one was complaining when the coach, or few people were complaining except me, when the coach was making at Illinois, the Illinois basketball coach is probably making $4 or $5 million a year, and the players were getting room, board, tuition, and books. And no one was complaining. Few people were complaining about that. So it seems weird to me that people say, "Oh, now it's out of control. Now that we're paying the black kids." That seems sort of problematic to me. Where I have a bigger problem with it is I wonder if I'm a professor at University of Illinois and the star basketball player is in my creative writing class and he's making $800,000 a year and he doesn't come to class and he gets caught cheating or he doesn't do the homework and I've got to flunk him. Now, is the professor who's making $70,000 a year going to be willing to flunk the player who's making 10 times more than him? And so what I think has happened, in college sports is that sports has become more and more important. And by the way, Mike, I've heard, I know you have too, I've heard plenty of talk from the Trump administration about how these leftist institutions and that kind of thing. And I think you're more likely to get a Marxist class. I don't know how math would be a Marxist math class or a Marxist biology class. But I will say this. At the University of Illinois, I'm mentioning them because your listeners are from there. The president probably makes $800,000 a year. The basketball coach probably makes $5 million a year. Football coach probably $4 million a year. The deans are all making $300,000 a year. But if you send your kid to University of Illinois, you didn't, I know, but if you send your kid to University of Illinois, they're going to get taught by underpaid adjuncts that don't have health insurance their first couple of years. Now, I would ask you and ask your listeners, is that a Marxist system? Is that a leftist system where there's people making millions at the top, but the people doing the work are underpaid without health insurance? That seems to me to be the corporate model. And I get that, they're teaching feminist theory in one class on campus, or they're teaching the history of Marxism in another class. But the truth is that American institutions, particularly the state universities, for a long time have been very much more the corporate model. But what I do think happens at universities, it's performative. I've sat in faculty meetings where my colleagues who I would have thought were liberal and leftist decided not to give the vote to the instructors because they're just not, quote, ready for the vote, which sounded like Mississippi in 1962 to me. So I think there is sort of a leftist performative aspect to universities. And my guess is that most university professors would probably vote Democrat, depending on what department. Engineering and business certainly would tend to vote Republican. But what I'm telling you is that the American universities are not based on a leftist system. They're a corporate model. When there's that big of a salary discrepancy between the basketball coaches and the people teaching the classes, that's not a Marxist system.
Well, Russ, we're going to leave it at that. And this has been wonderful talking to you. Maybe I'll see you later today because you are still in Chicago. I was going to ask you about the concentration camp being built in El Paso on the Army base there, but we'll talk about that another time.
Well, I haven't been back to El Paso for a long time, but we should get Beto O'Rourke back on the show.
We should do that. We got
Yep.
a lot to do with Beto. Beto's on fire.
Yep.
Okay, everybody, stay tuned here on the left end of your dial. You're listening to or viewing live from the Heartland for the week of August 29th. We've just heard Rus Bradburd. I'm still Michael James. We're going to take a musical break, and we'll be back with our next guest. Stay tuned.
There are few blue-eyed men I would choose to believe in this wide world round. But if I were on the ocean with the waves all around me, lean baby right back in your arms. Baby, roll me on the water. Now roll me on the water. Take me right down to the shore. Roll me on the water. Roll me on the water. Take me right down on the floor. There are few fair-haired men.
Hey, you citizens of the world. Welcome back to Live from the Heartland for the week of August 29th. And it gives me great pleasure to bring on my next guest. It's someone I'm getting to know. We're both members of, this is disclosure, we're both members of the steering committee of Network 49, which I got my little badge right up here somewhere. There it is. And we are a progressive outfit in the 49th Ward. We do work closely with the Democratic Party, but I think we're a little bit to the left.
Yeah.
And that said, here we are introducing our friend, Sarah Burry. And good morning to you, Sarah.
Good morning, Michael James. How are you?
I'm good. You almost made it home, but you didn't. So you're sitting here on a beautiful street in Rogers Park in the comfort of your car.
Yes. You know, running for office means being in your car a lot, especially when you're running countywide. So this is just what we've got today. So
Well, you're going to run for the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District to be a commissioner. And, we've had members of that body on before. We're living in kind of fragile and dire times. The president is challenging every black mayor in blue cities around the country. But we do think it's important to pay attention to other things too. And one of those, which certainly is influenced by federal budgets, I imagine, is our water and how we deal with sewage and water, et cetera, et cetera. So what does the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District do? What's it all about?
yeah, so the MWRD manages storm and wastewater. So anything that goes down the drain in your house or the rain that comes down, especially when it's, we're very familiar with the rain right now because it's been coming down in deluges. So anything from your drains and anything that goes down the drains outside, all go to the Water Reclamation District. And they're also the second largest landowner in Cook County, just after the forest preserves. And that's kind of a big deal to me. And then the other thing to know about them is they have a $1.7 billion budget. So it's definitely something that people should know about because your money is going here and a lot of the land is owned by them. So they have a lot of responsibilities that we don't really think about on a regular basis.
Is that water filtration set up outside near Navy Pier? Is that part of it? Or is that different?
So that's the crib. That's drinking water. And MWRD doesn't handle drinking water, just storm and wastewater.
Well, we got a lot of storm and wastewater these days because in certain parts of the city, there's been news lately about how the South Side and certain neighborhoods are getting flooded over and over again. And even a building in Uptown at Wilson and Broadway, which had gotten rebuilt and done, it's an old building, they're having problems with water. Tell us a little bit about...
Well, so actually, Michael, I actually grew up on the Southwest Side. And part of the reason why I'm running for this role is because I grew up in a house that flooded every time it rained. We used to measure how bad our flood was based on to which stair the flood got. And I remember pushing the sewage toward the drains. Like this is a real issue that people are facing. People are sending people on the Southwest Side in a slightly different neighborhood than the one I grew up in. I grew up in Clearing. And it's folks in West Lawn that are suffering from massive flooding right now. And I'm getting videos from community members saying, what do we do? Like, how what are we supposed to do about this? How can we get help with this? And so if you live in Chicago, make sure that you report your flood on the 311 app. And definitely there's a possibility that FEMA could help. But, it's hard to depend on FEMA right now, considering the administration in the White House.
Well, so you've experienced flooding. And I imagine that that's one reason that has led you to running for this position. But there may be others. You're a political animal, so to speak, and you probably have a progressive view on things. How about sharing with our listeners and our viewers a little bit about yourself, where you grow up, where you went to school, what you're interested in, and how you got involved in progressive politics?
Yeah. So it's funny that you say that, because some of the questions I get while I'm asking people for signatures are things like, do you believe in science? Do you believe in climate change? Are you pro-water or anti-water? And that's really interesting. It's really a sign of where we are in the world. So I actually was born in the same hospital as the new Pope. So that's exciting.
Right on.
And I grew up in Clearing, and I sort of hovered around that neighborhood for a while, Clearing and Garfield Ridge. I went to Chicago Public Schools, a local school for grade school, and then I went to Whitney Young for high school. And then, we were broke. So I went to Daly College for my first 2 years of college. And then I finished college at Roosevelt University. And all of those places had a message of equity and social justice. So I started picking it up very young. I also grew up in a house full of books. My mom would bring books in, and there was not really a restriction on what we could read. So me and my 4 siblings would fight over the books, who could read them next. And it ended up being whoever the next fastest reader was, which was never me, because I was the baby. But eventually I got the books, and we put them all in the basement. And then the same water that watered my dad's garden outside went into our basements and destroyed all of our books. And eventually the very foundation of the home had to be replaced. So literally the house was going to crumble because of these floods. But I grew up in a house full of, values on words, but also one of my mom's big lessons was that you need to be careful and act with integrity, because there may become a point in your life where you realize that your name is all that you have. So I take that very seriously, and walking around with a form that's asking people to put my name on the ballot, that's a really big deal to me. There's a lot of honor wrapped up in making these promises to people. And I believe in that. So after college, I taught remedial writing to college students who had graduated from high school but weren't ready for college writing yet. And then after a few years of that, I went to law school in DC at American University. And I had a conversation with someone who said that he was studying space law. And I was like, well, that's silly. Why would you do that? And so we
studying what?
He was studying space law.
Space law.
Yeah.
Okay.
It was 2008. I was like, why are you doing that? So we got into a conversation about water wars. So I went to one of my professors who happened to be an international environmental attorney. And after that conversation, I went to the registrar, changed all my classes. I took every environmental law class they offered at my school. And I signed up for a master's degree in global environmental politics because I wanted to know the law, but also how the environment impacted people and how people interact with it. And it wasn't until, so while I was in law school, I interned for the DOJ, the EPA, the city of Chicago in their environmental law sections. But it wasn't until I got out and I was a fellow for the Alliance for the Great Lakes. I was their Del Bryson Water Quality Fellow, that I realized it was really the water that was what I was drawn to. The water was what I wanted to work on. But everything that I do sort of has this extra layer of being concerned with equity. So you were asking about like how I became political. When I was on the South Side, there wasn't really, it was just like the machine did what it did. But when I came back from law school and I moved up north, I started to see that there were like local people running, and I worked on a couple campaigns, including Maria Haddon's first campaign. And I worked
Alderwoman. Maria Haddon is our alderwoman for those of you beyond the 49th.
That's right. And I was just like, the first time I met her, someone was like, you need to come meet this candidate. And I met her and I was like, yep, okay, she cares about the same things I do. And she cares about progressive values in the environment and like really is concerned about people. And so am I. And so do I. So I worked on her campaign. We also worked on Bring Chicago Home together. And most recently, I worked on Operation Swing State, sending people up to Michigan and Wisconsin to talk to folks about Kamala Harris and the other folks who are running as Democrats. So it's a lot like working on a campaign is a lot like working on a play where you have the beginning is a slow start and you're getting to know everyone and everyone really bonds. And then you get to this like climax that is the show. And then it's over and everybody goes away. And I used to do that. I used to volunteer with the theater. And so it's sort of a natural transition into campaigns. But the first time that Trump was on the ballot and he was going against Hillary Clinton, I had bought all of this champagne. And I was stocking it and my niece called that day. It was morning. The polls had barely just been open for an hour or so. And my niece called me and she's a woman of color and she's queer. And she said, what's going to happen to us if he wins? And I said, he's not going to win. And I'm packing my champagne. I have so much champagne, Michael. I was throwing a party and I haven't thrown a party since. But even before the results came back, I knew that I had to run for something on a local office on the local level, because it matters so much to people's lives. It can impact people so much. And it took me a matter of 10 minutes to realize that thing that I wanted to run for was the Water Reclamation District.
What will you do as a member of the Water Reclamation District if you are elected that stands out or differentiates you from some of the other candidates? I mean, there's a lot of good people who run for that office, and I probably are today still, but you are our neighbor and friend. So what are you going to bring to the job?
Yeah, I think it's important that the person who gets elected to this role is an environmentalist. It wasn't always the case that the MWRD was a place for environmentalists. It is often a place that folks go to retire or as like a springboard for other offices. And that's not why I'm doing it. I want to work on water. And I want to help people who have problems with flooding and things like that. So first, I think it's important that there's an environmentalist. And I'm running for the 6-year term. And for the 6-year term, there are currently 3 environmentalists who are running that I know of.
How many people get elected?
3 people get elected. So you'll be able to go in and choose your favorite 3. And right now, as far as I know, there are 3 people who are environmentalists. So that's Precious Pretty Davis, Ada Krell Sepulveda, and me. The person that I would like to replace is a nice lady. She's chair of the Moraine Valley Community College, and as someone who went to community college, I totally respect that. And as a former teacher, I totally respect the educational field. But she just doesn't have environmental experience, and I think that's really important. The other thing I bring to it is that I'm an attorney, and part of what the board does that people don't really think about is that they do things like they approve leases, because they're the second largest landowner in Cook County. They approve like workers' comp settlements. They approve contracts for things like cleaning supplies. And so a lot of it really has like a legal angle to it. So I think that would be helpful for me to be able to explain to people what the MWRD is doing, because I can understand what those things are. And then the third thing is I really want to focus on bringing people back into the agency in the first place. So during the pandemic, the MWRD realized that they could do remote comment, which is fabulous. They, like other agencies, have their meetings in the middle of the day, in the middle of the week, in the middle of a neighborhood that doesn't have parking, which is pretty common for a government agency, right? So they did remote comment, which is amazing. But then they decided, after the pandemic was declared to be over, they decided that's a little too much democracy. And they took it back a little bit and they made it so that people could submit comments and they would be read out loud during the meeting. And I think that already quiets community voice. But then even that was too much, and they took it back to where you could submit comments and it would go to the commissioners. And that's completely quieted community voice. So I think we need to bring remote public comment back because we shouldn't require people to take time off of work to come to a meeting. That's wild. And also I want to have virtual office hours so that people can participate and come ask questions and get to know what's happening at the water rec. And I want to have meetings in communities. Like the number one lesson of my master's degree was to trust communities to know what they need and to meet them where they are. And I think it's really important that we do that. And every commissioner that is elected for this role represents all of the people in the whole district. They're not small. They're not like sub districts like there are for like the Cook County commissioners. The MWD commissioners represent the whole county, almost the whole county. Good. But that means that I would represent, as someone who lives in Rogers Park, I would represent someone in Thornton or Orland or Hanover Park or the South or West Side. And I think it's important to spend time in those communities and get to know those communities and build relationships with them and their local leaders as well.
Sarah Burry, let's be clear here. You are running for the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District for the 6th-year position. There'll be 3 out of all the candidates that the people who vote can pick. We encourage everybody to vote. Will you, if people want to know more from you and get involved, perhaps give us your email or your website. And then I'm going to ask you one last question.
Yeah, I do want to say that there is going to be 2 races for MWD. One is the 6-year race where you pick 3, and then one is the 2-year race where you only pick 1. So you're going to see both of those on your ballot. So just so people don't get confused. If you want to help, I do need 2 forms of help. We do need donations, obviously, because it's a county-wide race. And I also need help getting signatures. And you can sign up for either of those on the website, which is Sarah, SARAH, the number 4, waterrec.org. So SARAH, the number 4, WATERREC.org. And then you can email us at contact@sarahforwaterrec.org or you could also follow us on social. We're on both Instagram and Facebook at Sarah for Water Rec, just to keep it easy.
Okay, as we go out, can you give us a little insight into the impact of climate change on our water here in Chicago and our water reclamation procedures here in Chicago?
Yeah. So actually the IEC just published something where they were talking about how someone introduced, I think it was Graciela Guzman, introduced a law that would help us transition people into Cook County or around Chicago who are climate refugees. Like, people are going to come here because we're in a good place. There aren't so many natural disasters. We have all this fresh water, and we need to prepare for that in terms of making sure the sewer doesn't get overwhelmed. Because when the sewer gets overwhelmed, people's basements get backed up and they release untreated sewage into our waterways, which obviously we want to avoid. So we need to get ahead of that. And the way that we do that is by creating a distributed network of green infrastructure in places that need it most. And that includes the locations, the neighborhoods that haven't been invested in the way they should have been.
That's good.
Yep.
I look forward to seeing you in the neighborhood, and we'll be talking to you before you know it. Awesome. That's Sarah Burry. She's running for the Metropolitan Water Reclamation District. Everyone pay attention. She's a good person. And we are going to take a very short musical break, and we're going to come back for one last tiny segment with our music producer, Lynn Orman, who's going to fill us in on a few musical details. Be right back. Thanks, Sarah.
Baseball season's underway. Well, you better get ready for a brand new day. Hey, Chicago, what do you say? The Cubs are gonna win today. They're singing, go,
back to Live from the Heartland for the week of August 29th. I'm still Michael James, and we have a few minutes left. And I asked our wonderful music producer, Lynn Orman, who is concerned about her floppy-eared rabbit these days, to come on the show and give us a little bit of music update. What do you got, Lynn? Give it to us.
Hey, Michael. Hi, Live from the Heartland. Everybody, there's so much going on. It's been a really busy summer. And to close it out and start fall, for everybody up in the North Shore, we have the Evanston Folk Festival, kind of, mirroring itself like the Newport Folk Festival. Really a tremendous lineup of artists. It's right on the lakefront at Dawes Park, which is great. It goes 2 days, September 6th and September 7th. It starts at 12 and doors open at 11:30. It's really beautiful. My other show, WNUR, the folk show, will be hosting a lot of the stages. Some highlights, there's a lot of local music. Steve Dawson, if you know who that is, some people I would love to have on. But what's really unique about this festival, they do evening performances as well. So at Evanston Space and then at Con Auditorium in Evanston, they'll have Annie DeFranco and also Roseanne Cash. And my favorite thing about the Folk Festival is their tent. They have WBEZ hosts a conversation, and it's a public media tent with speakers. So they'll have Bonnie Koloc. They'll have Gail Wald, who you interviewed a couple of weeks ago about Ella Jenkins. And so the tent is there. And tickets are available at evanstonfolkfestival.com. Also, September 6th, a young band who I love, fresh out of high school. You'll know this, to the likes of Twin Peaks. They're called Your Mom, and they won the Bitter Jester Festival, which we had Nicholas DeGrazia on a few years ago. And it's their 20th year of this incredible youth festival. And they'll be at Martyrs on the 6th. Also, September 14th, maybe we'll have time to come back on and talk about this, but the Illinois Rock and Roll Museum at Route 66 is extraordinary. September 14th in Joliet at the Rialto Theater. And that is going to feature some extraordinary, from folk to blues to rock and roll. The Smashing Pumpkins are going to be inducted. Disturbed is going to be inducted. The Shylights, Marshall Thompson. And then there's a huge tribute to the blues. So Delmark Records, Bo Diddley, Little Walter, Willie Dixon, and oh my God, I'm missing somebody. Willie.
Okay.
Well, anyway, it's going to be great. And then the cap on this, which I love, they're honoring Stevie Goodman and the song "Go Cubs Go," and that's going to be presented by Corky Siegel. Bonnie Koloc with a performance, which is very rare these days. She is my hero, really. Bonnie Koloc and Skip Griparis. So it's going to be an incredible weekend. You can go to the Illinois Rock and Roll Museum, Route 66, and get your tickets there.
Okay,
That's all I got.
Thanks a lot. We are a musical town. We are a wonderful city, a great area. We love the state of Illinois. And I want to thank everybody for tuning in to Live from the Heartland for the week of August 29th. A couple of things in memoriam. Doug Long of DePaul, who ran the first year program, which I taught at for about 10 years, has passed away from leukemia. He was a wonderful guy, and we're sorry to learn of his passing. Also of note, a guy named Richard Lee, a pot activist who relied on marijuana to ease his pain after a paralyzing work accident. He's known as the Johnny Appleseed of pot, founded the groundbreaking Cannabis College, and was an influential person in the legalization of marijuana. He died July 27th in Houston at 62. Last week, we had Dave Kraft from the Nuclear Energy Information Service on. And he talked a bunch about nuclear power, the attempts to bring it back more so in Illinois. We're against that. And we also had Max Sampson talking about indigenous Chicago. Next week, I think we have Don Rose, and Fred Klonsky is going to talk about Mandami's race for mayor in New York. Also coming up in the near future is Grady Chambers, who has a new book. And I will be at the Hairpin Gallery this Sunday, the 31st. That's the Zine Fest, and it's upstairs at Hairpin at the corner of Diversity in Milwaukee. And then I will be next on the 6th, Saturday, at the Wicker Park art fair. And don't forget, on the 12th, I'll be at the Yuri Eichen Gallery with a reading from my new book, with an exhibit of the photos. That's Yuri Eichen, 2101 South Halstead. Love to see you when I'm out and about. Come by and say hello. Everybody continue to do good in the world. The world needs all the good that we do more than ever, and together we can do it. So all power to the people. Over and out. See you next week. Thank you for watching the Live from the Heartland show. New episodes air every Friday beginning at 9 a.m. Central Time. Episodes air each following Thursday on CAN TV, 9 p.m. in Sweet Home Chicago on Channel 21, or streaming everywhere else at cantv.org. Audio episodes go live on WLUW each Saturday, 9 a.m. on the left end of your dial at 88.7 FM, or streaming everywhere worldwide at WLUW.org. They're available on Apple and Spotify podcasts by looking up Live from the Heartland on either platform, and are also broadcast on Lumpen Radio each Friday at 9 a.m. on 105.5 FM and streaming at lumpenradio.com. I'm Michael James, and I'm glad to have been your host. Until next time, remember, do good in the world, because the world needs all the good that you do, that I do, that we do together. All power to the people. Over and out.
Come to Limbo. Are you doing the best you can? Tell me, are you doing